Welcome back to Learn Your Stripes. I'm Ryan Guillory.
And I'm Michael Moran. And today we are joined by Rick Frank to discuss more of your questions and topics. Before we get started with that, we'll give a quick introduction for Rick here in just a minute. We're going to cover our play from last week. We had 4th and 10 for K from the K 5-yard line. K punts from his own end zone and is muffed by R1 at the K12. It rebounds back into K's end zone where it's recovered by K1, who is immediately tackled. And we asked what your ruling was. We're looking for the foul, any difference between high school and college, what the down and distance would be, and of course, the game clock and play clock status. Now, this is a safety because the force that put the ball in the end zone is K1's kick. R is going to be awarded 2 points. K will have a free kick from their own 20-yard line, and we will have a 25-second play clock. Game clock, obviously, here is going to be stopped until the kick is touched by R in the field of play.
We're joined tonight by Rick Frank. He's the football chair of Michael and I's local association, the Indiana Officials Association. Rick has been in charge of this association since early on in Michael and I's career, and the topics and the information that we've received from those meetings and from Rick's guidance has been quite formative in our careers. We're pleased that he'll join us tonight, and I'll turn it over now to Michael.
I've known Rick for a couple of years. Rick, we're happy to have you on tonight. Rick's always been very helpful to me, very kind to me, and I've always appreciated Rick's leadership in our meetings for the IOA as well. So it's an honor to have you tonight, Rick. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. And I will just mention up front that this was sort of a brainchild of our committee over the summer when we were all chatting about new projects that maybe we could do outside of just our Wednesday meetings. And you two took this by the horns and went way beyond what I thought it could be. And I appreciate that. And I think it's just going to probably continue to grow. So I've not listened to every version, but I've caught most of it, all of your banter back and forth. And it's been really educational and fun to listen to. And I think exactly the purpose that we wanted. So I appreciate that.
Well, thanks, Rick. Yeah, we appreciate the feedback and the opportunity, right? I mean, it's something that we've talked about. We started off going through the IHSA mechanics manual, and we've completed that last week, thankfully.
Yeah,
we've gone cover to cover on it, and hopefully it's been educational for our association and others throughout the state.
And probably for you too also. I mean, I went through law school with the idea that if I could learn to teach it, then I would know it well enough that I could know it myself. So when you know it well enough to teach, then that's a good thing, which you guys have done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was much more helpful for us than just sitting down and trying to read, 20 pages at a time or whatever it might be. But with that said, we're fortunate we've had some questions and topics submitted tonight. We've had a few that we covered on our last mailbag episode that we might cover again just to get your perspective on as well, Rick.
So we're not going back through the manual?
We're not
tonight.
To go through the manual.
I was told we were going to go back through all 78 pages of the manual. So,
well, that'll be for your next appearance.
Oh, damn it. All right.
So we'll prepare a little harder for that so that we can get all the punctuation and have all the subclauses and whatnot correct from the manual.
All right. We'll go ahead and do your questions then.
One of our friends and a devoted listener, David, has submitted a couple of questions and issues for us to discuss, and we appreciate that. So let's get into those. So here's the first scenario. Players losing helmets during a play. He's noticed, because he works with some different crews throughout the season, that some crews are adamant about calling a timeout to give a coach time to make the required adjustment, whereas many just send a player out and expect the coach to react quickly. How do you handle this, Rick, as a white hat? Does it differ for you if it's clear to everyone that the helmet came off during the play, as opposed to the one that comes off in the middle of the pile?
Yeah, I think what the last part you said there is exactly what kind of dictates on our crew. If it's And I tell you, the other thing that's good about it now is I think players know when it comes off that they have to sit out of play, so you don't have to run them off anymore. They just take off. So if it comes off during the play and the player already realizes that he's on his way off, we don't stop the clock or make a big deal of it. What I do try to make sure, though, is that the sub, whoever's coming in for that player, is back in with about 20 seconds on the play clock, and if not, I'll reset the play clock. Probably won't kill it and make a big production of it, but I do want to make sure that they have enough play time. Another crew told me, Mike Eason's crew had a game where he did kill the clock. The other team that wasn't involved in the helmet thought it was a timeout. And they went to the sideline, and it became kind of an issue at that point, getting both teams back out on the field. So I can see where it is a confusing thing and can be a confusing thing. How do you guys do it?
We actually had one last week. It occurred in front of me. It was early on in the play. It was just a block, and I don't know how the helmet came off. I really don't, but the kid's helmet just popped off. I think it was a tight end. And he stopped. You know, it wasn't illegal participation. He stopped participating in the play. And as soon as the runner was down, he just picked up the helmet, scooped it up, and ran off the field. I was kicking it around while the play is going on a little bit in my head of, am I going to need to kill this? But I mean, it was obvious the kid knew what happened. He knew where he was headed, which was off to a sideline. And so, it was a 40-second clock play. So I didn't see any need to kill the clock myself, so I didn't. And I don't even know if JP saw it. I'm sure he probably did. We didn't talk about it afterwards, which maybe I should have done prior to addressing this question tonight. But I mean, on our crew, I mean, we've got people we trust between, JP, Michael, Daniel, and Drew. If any of them want to kill a clock for something they think requires it, I'm not going to second guess it. And I think they give me the same benefit of the doubt. So, the kid picks it up as soon as the whistle sounds. He's running off as the 40-second clock starting. If that team can't run a new player in 30 seconds and get the snap off,
I agree.
That's kind of
the one thing we do that I would add, I think other crews should do as well, is we always say over the radio, 35's helmet's off, he's out for a play.
Right.
Even if they go out and you're the only one that sees it, we let everybody know that. So 35 doesn't come back in without somebody not knowing he can't.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's different too if we've got a big, if we're near the goal line and there's a run up the middle and there's 15 bodies there and it's going to take a while to unpile and the 40-second clock starts. That's probably a scenario where I would consider stopping it. But last week we were near the 50. There was nothing like that, so I didn't see a need to kill it. Any different thoughts on that, Michael?
I think as long as the coach is aware, and normally in today's game, like Rick said, they're already heading that way. And I'll open the mic up so you guys are hearing me talk to the coach and say, "Hey, 23 is coming out, coach. He's got to sit out for a play. Helmet came off." Just that simple. So, but along the lines of helmets coming off, timeouts are very similar in just how they're handled and how they're managed. So, if we're talking about a timeout for an injury, some crews like to treat it like a normal timeout and allowing coaches to talk with players outside the 9-yard marks. Others have the wings stand to the numbers and stop players. And some call for water breaks and won't even let teams go to the sideline. So there's not a lot of consistency with this. So Rick, what does your crew do when you have an injury timeout?
Yeah, it was an interesting question when you sent that to me because we used to be the Nazis, to be honest. We used to make it be like an official timeout where they had to be in the correct places, and it really got kind of old after a while, to be honest. So now we send them to the sidelines. If it's going to be an injury more than 15, 20 seconds, one of us will say, "Go to the sidelines, we'll come and get you." And they can do whatever they want over there. They can get water. We allow coach to come out, and we'll go get them when the player's going off the field. And for the last couple of years, we've done it that way, and it's been much more smooth. Haven't had any complaints. Both coaches get the same. Both teams get the same advantage, and there's really nothing gained by either team, I think.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much the same. I try to think of the old officiating axiom, don't trouble trouble, and coming out and being super strict on this or causing people to, I don't know, to think that we're just being strict for the sake of doing it to assert authority or whatnot. I just don't see the benefit of it. I think that weather plays in too. Michael, if we think back to our week 1 game this year, I don't know how many cramps we had in that game.
It was 85 degrees with 110% humidity, and everybody sweated off 5 pounds during the game. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it rained in about 2
including
square
JP?
miles.
I think so. All of us. I think my socks were wet.
But I think looking at the radar, it rained in about a 2 square mile area of the state of Indiana that evening, right before the game, and that included
right over
our field. So just the humidity and the cramping was. I've never been in a game, and it wasn't even 90 degrees. It was just the conditions. So every time there was a cramp, you could be sure we were sending everybody to the sideline. Go get water. Take a rest, go get water. Obviously, we're not going to turn these into 10-minute timeouts, but when there's a cramp in the field, it's going to take a little while. They're not popping right back up and running off generally from that. So giving those conditions, I have no issue with it. But I don't really care, right? If it's something that looks fairly minimal, maybe I won't send them all the way off. Maybe we'll have attendants come out with, something like that. But generally, if they're staying down, it's probably going to take a little while to get them back up and off the field. I have no issue letting them go over. And I know since Michael's across the field from me, I know that we pretty much handled it the same way, don't we?
We had a trainer. I wish I remember the school, but I think it was a season in Player goes down, trainer runs out, says, "You cramping?" Kid goes, "Yeah, my calf." He goes, "Cool." He grabs his foot and pushes 1, 2, and says, "Okay, get up." just enough to stretch and said, "All right, we're going." And he looked at me and said, "Let's go."
Yeah,
That's my favorite trainer.
We had a team a couple of years ago that were eating pickles, the big long pickles, and I had no idea that was supposed to stop cramps.
Yeah, pickle juice, mustard packets. We bring a bag out to the field with us, so we'll have certain emergency supplies. Like if the chains break, we have extra zip ties in there and all that. Michael and I usually have them in our pockets too. But
you have pickles in there?
We don't have pickles, but we do have mustard.
Next week we'll have pickles.
We take a bag out, but we have never had pickles in it. I'll guarantee you that.
No, we've not gotten there. But yeah, maybe some of those bag pickles like you might get at a basketball game or something.
This whole team was eating pickles, and we had never seen it before. And then they had like 13 cramps in the second half, so the pickles did not work.
It might have had the wrong ones or something.
I guess.
I think it's more the pickle juice, though. So, I mean, really get the giant jar at Costco, get the pickles out, and then have that on the sideline to dip in.
I think you hit the nail on the head, though. Is just don't go looking for issues. I mean, and we did the same thing you did. We used those as kind of the heat breaks. If somebody had an injury, they got extra water back when the times were hot. That's just common sense, man.
Yeah. It's kind of a place where you can build a rapport with a coach too, right, Rick? I mean, I know Ryan and I are still early on in our career here, but we'd like to think it's going to go for a little bit longer. Just that ability to develop that relationship with a coach is this kind of one area where you can help with that administration.
And I mean, not always, but sometimes it's a safety thing too. You don't want the players around somebody who's injured. If you got to bring out a stretcher or more trainers or more coaches or, God forbid, an ambulance, you don't want those people around anyway. So sometimes it's just good to get them away from that situation on top of the fact of just letting them have a little break and a timeout and water also. So just makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think it is. And I understand Dave's question quite well because I know different crews do this differently, right? I mean, there are some who will be, the inside the nines meeting versus outside the nines and who can come in and who can't. But like you said, I think we have the same philosophy. Just send them towards the sidelines, get them outside the numbers, and, then the coaches can meet with them. The attendants can come out with water. I don't care if it's 3 attendants or 4 if they're out there. I'm not sitting there and counting and running some poor student with water bottles off the field by any means. I don't see, we're strict about our sideline, right? Our box, the restricted area on the sideline. That's an area where I'm strict. But in terms of a water break during an injury, that's just not something that I need to be involved in. I don't think. And it sounds like generally that's our philosophy. And so hopefully that somewhat spreads throughout, because I don't want to put another crew in a bad position where if we're fairly lax about it one week and they come in and want to be, by the book, very strict about it, then the coach says, hey, these guys last week allowed us to do this. But by the same token, if we're consistent and that we're more relaxed about it, then so much the better for everyone.
I want to touch on that, what you just said. When Rick, I'm sure you've gotten this before when the coach says, these guys last week let us do it, or that wasn't a problem last week, or something related to a different crew. What's something that you use tactfully to address that?
I honestly have never commented. I don't ask who the crew was. I don't ask what they did wrong. I address exactly what his issue is. So if the crew, made them take out their mouthpieces for the first time ever or whatever, I don't care about that. I say, well, here's the rule on mouthpieces, and this is how we're going to enforce it, or whatever his situation is. And
you just
you're right. We get that a lot.
This week. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, sometimes they'll bring out video even and be like, here's the video from last week. And you got to see this crew. And I'm like, nah, thanks. I mean, I don't want to know who the crew is. I don't want to. I never ask who the crew was or is, or I just don't want to know. I mean, even if I thought they were wrong, or even if what he says is true, I don't want to be like, man, that crew must have been messed up. I just don't want to know.
Gotcha.
Because I always think I never know the context of what they were telling him. I mean, it's his story, but what's the context of why they did what they did and how did the game go? And we don't know any of that. So that's just bullshit. That's twice I've cussed on this podcast. Is that the first 2 cuss words on this whole podcast?
I think it is. Yeah.
We've
I
been
think the pool is on me, but
we've been very careful about it. It's something that we've talked about. At some point, we were going to get there, but this may be our first episode with an explicit rating from the various podcast apps.
Yeah. So you have to put your editor have a warning on the front. It's 13 and older on this episode only. We got Frank on here and his potty mouth.
The newer officials, they might be age restricted from listening to this one.
yeah, there you go. So let's talk about if we've talked
So
about
wait,
killing.
back up. What do you do, Michael? What do you do when somebody says Frank's crew was here last week and they screwed this all up? Are you going to do the same thing?
I normally say, we'll just do whatever they did. No, I'm just kidding. Normally when it happens and they say, oh, we've never heard that before, we've never done this, I've actually never had a good answer. It's usually gets me stumped because I'm trying to find the right words to be respectful of the coach, and I think we're talking about addressing the coach later, but at the same time, I don't want to look like I'm totally incompetent, so I've never had a good answer. I usually default to, well, by rule, coach, this is what we're going to do, or let's try to work together on this and figure this out. But I don't like to talk about what happened in a previous game because that's over and that's done.
I try to treat it the same way as with rules. I remember a game this year where, the classic high school defensive pass interference on a 4th and 18 or whatever, where, it goes to 4th and 3 and then everyone in the stadium, including most of the sidelines, asking why it's not a first down. Well, because that's not the high school rule, right? So if I then get asked, well, this crew last week did so-and-so, my response that I've generally had is, well, the mechanics that they're asking me to follow now tells me to do this, right? So I'm not saying they were wrong. I'm not saying that they screwed up. I'm just saying, this is how I'm addressing it because this is, and now that we have a new mechanics manual this year, so much the better, built-in excuse, right? But
very often, I think it's probably the coach who didn't know it, and it's easier to deflect it on the crew. One of my buddies was telling me they had a game at a 6A school. Coach has been there a long time. Had a pass interference on a touchdown that scored, and he went over to ask him if he wanted on the kickoff of the PAT, and he said, "I've never heard of that. They have to decline that penalty, right?" And this is an established 6A coach, so I'm sure next week they're going to be, you can't believe what this crew did last week. They added this penalty on. So a lot of times I think it's probably just coaches' misunderstanding or a lack of context.
Yeah, it's sort of the same way that I don't second guess. If I'm watching a play on TV or video.
Oh, you do too, you liar. We all do. Come on, Ryan. You don't second guess. Come on now. We all do. That's what refs do, for God's sakes.
Well, but
Nobody watches the game the same way when you become
Come
a ref.
on.
Every
We're like,
game is
I would have called that a DPI. What's that guy thinking? Come on.
I won't say I never have, but if somebody else asks me, or if a coach asks me sometimes, what's the back judge looking at there? My response is they had a different angle than I did. And so they would have viewed it differently from me, right? Just because I don't know. Again, I trust the other 4 guys on my crew with whatever call they make, right? And I think that's important on a crew, but I will never ever on any single play have the same angle that they did. And if a coach who's further down the sideline from me says, "Hey, did you see? I had a hold there," and I've said, if it's something that I just couldn't see or didn't see, this is the standard. Coach, I had a different angle from you, or coach, if I look at it on film and if what you're telling me is right, then I missed that. Something along those lines. But for me, it's the same here, right? If somebody wants to ask me about a play either from the last quarter or from last week, I just inevitably, I didn't have the same angles as somebody else. I didn't have the same view. I didn't have the same context as to whatever that past game was. And so whether I'm passing judgment in my head, whatever comes out of my mouth certainly isn't going to match that.
Yeah, I think the one thing, and I know you two wouldn't, but the one thing we should never tell them, maybe for more on live stuff than the questions are, is that's not my call.
Yeah. Don't say that.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, I know you two wouldn't, but that's just a horrible cop out and not a crew explanation, and just should probably terminology that should never be used.
Yeah, I think it's a crutch, and it puts your crew as a whole, it puts you in a bad spot, because if you're doing it to those guys, are they doing it to you if the coach asked them a question about something you did or didn't call? So
I always say I had the same 70-foot view that you did, Coach, so let's just guess together here.
Yeah,
I like
I think
that.
that's fine. But I would never say it's not my call. I'll just say either I'll get you information, because sometimes they'll ask, what did he see? Obviously, I don't know, but if I can get a reasonable explanation that I think is worth sharing, then I'll get that, and I'll share it, right?
Right.
He had a hook and restrict, or there's a grab and restrict, on the other side of the field from us, so we couldn't see it from over here, but that's what he saw. Something like that.
I like that.
But not a that's not my call.
Now, if it's somebody I know, then I'll say, Coach, listen, he's horrible. I know that. So he probably missed it. Okay.
I think that's probably what Michael does when they're talking about my sideline. But
that's probably what happened at Michael's junior high game tonight. Somebody said, yeah, Coach, we know he's horrible. All right. And Jake said, yep, we know.
Or God forbid, there's a referee conference with Michael and JP, the opposite sideline, for me about something that happened, in front of my feet.
Pontificating about you. Sounds like something that might have happened. Maybe you better move on.
Inevitably, that moron over there missed it.
Oh, Lord. Let's get to our next question.
Do you want to grab that, Michael?
Oh, okay. So we talked about killing it, timeouts, injuries. So when we're talking about ready for play whistle, and I think this is a good question for a white hat. Some crews use the whistle for the 25 seconds when they're putting it in. Others simply just make a signal and have the umpire communicate to the snapper. Rick, what are you doing on Friday nights when it comes to using the 25-second play clock?
I have never heard of not blowing the whistle when the 25-second clock comes in. So,
okay,
to me that's not a thing. I don't know where that comes from or why that would come about. And because think about it. One, we're letting the players know that the play clock's in, but we're also letting the timer know that
right.
that the play clock needs to start. And sometimes they go by the whistle, not your signal. And three, we're letting the coach know that now he's got 25 seconds to make a play call. We're also it's a show, so we're playing to the crowd. They need to know the play started also to put their hot dog down and pay attention. So not blowing the whistle to me would just not be a thing.
I think the more I've thought through this, maybe that it's sort of the transition from the purely 25 to the 40-second clock. Because I remember a couple seasons ago working with a white hat who substituted with us, who on every first down was blowing the whistle while winding to get it started again. And I had a coach come and say, why is he blowing the whistle every time? Yeah. And I was too young and dumb at that point to to have much of an explanation, but then went and talked it out. So I think obviously with the transition over the past few years, maybe that's part of it. But yeah, every 25-second clock, whenever you're getting to a 25-second clock in high school, and if I'm trying to think, probably in college, there's something that's precipitated that, whether it's a penalty, change of possession, helmet off from the offense, injury on the offense, something like that. There's a reason that you've stopped play. And so everybody's kind of milling around in the middle of the field. So like you said, Rick, it gives the players, which I think is most important, the awareness, but how do I put this delicately?
I think we're way beyond delicate tonight.
The play clock operator from one school to the next may not have the same acuity from week to week, right? So I know with you as white hat, there's probably times where you're chopping in the 25 and it's whistle, chop, 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 and giving that signal over and over again. So I think the whistle, like you said, it certainly helps. Maybe it wakes them up, and eventually on your 12th or 13th time trying to start the play clock, they might actually roll it.
And as you were talking, it made me think also probably better than half the time, you're also going to be starting the game clock on those. So, it's double important to get their attention to if you're going to roll the game clock also. So I just think that's not a thing.
For, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that it certainly helps there. I did some this weekend at White Hat where some of those weekend games, you never know who's going to be up in the box rolling either the play clock or the game clock.
So not related to this question, but do you guys give your timer a radio? Because I do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's an important thing. If crews are using radios and you're not giving the timer radio, you should probably think about that. And it's a good communication tool to reset the clock if you need to. But also, if he's late starting the 25 3 times in a row, in between quarters, chime up there and say, "Hey, let's try to get it started a little bit sooner for me up there."
Yeah, we do, and I suspect that you have a similar process to us. So we have our radios on one channel together, and then we have the clock operators radio on another.
Correct.
And so then our back judge has two radios, so one to communicate with us, and then another he can pull off his belt to speak with the clock operator. I suppose he could just do one and change the channel, but
That's what I do.
But as long as you just got the channels differently and set up, so you know how to get from one to the other.
And
should solve the problem.
I don't know what radios you use, but the radios we use are programmable. So I can program it so that only the timer has channel 1, which is what we put them on. So he can never listen to our channel.
I think we may have done that, but again, my technical acuity is not all that high. So that was
or
something
you go
that,
old school and just pull the knob off.
We have the knob off too, actually, Michael.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought I heard that from you.
Yeah, we did that at first, and now it's double insulated.
I was at a school where I had I think it was a trainer of some kind, but they came down and said, "Hey guys, we're on channel 6. What channel are you guys on? Just so we don't run interference and step over you."
Okay.
And I'm just kind of looking at him like he's got two heads. And my it was a college game, and my line judge through that day says, "Well, we're not on channel 6."
Very wise.
So the trainer goes, "What channel are you on?" He goes, "We're not on channel 6. It'll be okay." Just walked away.
So then he spent the whole first quarter trying to figure out what channel it was.
Oh, I don't know. I think he had other things to do, but that was funny.
Yeah, I think that's an easy way to address that. Obviously, not every high school stadium has a field mic for the white hat to use to be able to reset the game clock or address some problem with that. So having that backup radio there, or just a separate channel, certainly helps to solve that, because you don't know what you're going to get from week to week, and a lot of times the clock operators may be sick or may be out that week or something, and there's a substitute, and you never know what you're going to get when you show up.
No, it's good. I communicate with them after about every quarter, sometimes after every score. I very often like to suggest songs for them to play too. So sometimes I'm like the DJ from the field also.
Nice.
Well, I know JP doesn't do that, so maybe we got to get him to. Maybe he needs to earn his check a little bit better.
Come on, JP.
One of the next questions we wanted to talk was just addressing a coach. And one of the observations was that many younger officials, and I feel somewhat weird saying that, but many younger officials insist on addressing a coach by a first name, and might even argue that with some crews. But obviously, as officials, part of our mechanics and part of just our general, behavior is that we want to be respectful and professional with what we're doing. And the mechanics manual, as Dave points out, actually addresses this on page 57, that we're always refer to a coach as coach. Rick, I know that you've done this a little bit longer than Michael and I have, and as the white hat, you probably speak with coaches throughout the week more than we do, or in advance of a game. If it's a coach that you've had, I don't know, a dozen times, or that that you've spoken with, many, many times, do you ever address a coach on a more personal level, or is it during a game? Is it just, "Hey, coach," or "Coach, we've got this"? How do you handle that?
So I'm probably an offender of this, and page 57 or whatever page you said it was is probably something and I've tried to do a little bit better with it, because I understand the philosophy of it, that they've earned that title of coach and they should be called that. But I do address some coaches by first name. I would not encourage it, and probably you should just get used to calling them coach. I do it more in pregame and after the game.
Yeah.
During the game, I think it's pretty much, "Coach, do you want this penalty? Coach, here's the options," that kind of stuff. But I don't care if they call me Rick either. I mean, they don't have to call me Mr. Official. So,
Right.
there's no disrespect to me if they call me by my first name either, and none given to them either. But I certainly get what the manual says and why you should do that. And you probably should just learn to call people coach. I'm sure in the Heartland, you guys don't call people by the first name, do you?
Nope.
Yeah. So, next level, you're going to have to do that anyway. And it is a show of respect, but I'm not going to lie, I probably violated some.
Yeah, and it's a little different there too, because we'll see coaches multiple times per season, whereas in high school we tend not to. I mean, sometimes you'll get the same team a couple times, whereas in an 8-team conference, there's you're going to see the same
Overlap.
people
Yeah.
multiple times as you go, right? And then with the JV games, if we're communicating with them during the week, we'll email or call, Coach so and so, and there. But yeah, I mean, for me, I'm the same way. If I'm on the field, from the time we step out, 6:15 or whatever it is, till the game's over, it's coach. And quite frankly, it's a mental crutch for me, because if I try to remember the name on top of remembering the line of scrimmage and the line to gain, trying to remember, everything else that's going on out there, I'm going to mess it up, right? So coach is the title. I'm always going to be correct if I say coach, or go to him and say, Coach, we've got this. I'm never going to get the wrong name. It's not the old commercial at the concert where they get the city wrong. I don't want to
I will say
that by any means.
Sometimes during the game, I do say their first name. And the reason is this: if I'm trying to get their attention to get either a penalty acceptance or tell them about a player or something, if you look to the sideline and holler coach, 9 people look at you and say, what? So there's a particular one that I'm looking for. So I probably have done that. I mean, I saw it in the manual. I agree with it. I think you should probably try to do it. I don't think it's that big of a thing if you call them by their first name, though.
Yeah. Well, I think as wing, I think that's a different perspective for our positions too, right? So with you in the middle of the field, if you're trying to get a coach's attention versus me or Michael on the sideline, I know pretty quickly how to get to my coach, right? To the head coach and where he is. So
very often they're probably the only ones that talk to you anyway.
Usually.
That's the way we like it.
At least that's how they want it most of the time too. They don't want the assistants talking to us, and obviously we don't, particularly either, because we don't want 3 or 4 different perspectives on timeouts or penalty acceptance and all that.
So what is your 2 tolerance level on how far they can go before they're going to get a flag? You're both on the sidelines now.
In terms of verbiage or stepping out on the field?
Oh, I don't know. Stepping out on the field, their actions, their gestures, their language, their whatever.
I know that if they're stepping on the field 1 or 2 steps and they're calling their play, I don't have an issue with it. If they've consistently stepped out and stepped back, I just to call their play, I don't mind it. Ryan, I know you and I in the meeting we were at last night, they said if a coach ever steps on the field to argue a call, to go ahead and flag him for that and get him for that early. So we're not making they're not trying to make a show and make a mockery of us by coming onto the field like that and addressing us or berating us. We want to shut that down. Luckily, I haven't had too much of that. And I think if, as a wing, part of your job is to prevent that from happening, you need to have a good relationship with the coach going into the game and during the game to get those questions. So if you say, Coach, I'll get you information next play, you better have an answer for him on that hold or that pass interference or whatever that next play. And that, I think, goes a long way.
Yeah, as Michael alluded to, it's a point of emphasis this year in college that if a coach wants to argue a call, if they are stepping out onto the grass anywhere, that's 15, right? It's a foul. And I know there's not quite the same guidance in high school, but I'm kind of the same mind there. Fortunately, it doesn't really happen that often. I mean, I might get a half step out on the field. I'm not going to measure how far off they are if they want to argue a call there. But yeah, I mean, for me, in terms of my tolerance, I have no problems with them asking for information. I have no problem. It's sort of, I know you work basketball as well. And so with football and basketball, the guidance I've always gotten is that there's a difference between a statement and a question. And I answer questions. I don't answer statements. So as long as it's a statement that doesn't, call into question us personally, then I don't care, right? If we have a pass interference and they dispute it, okay. The only times for me it's ever crossed the line, and it's been very, very rare, but I've gotten a few of the you did this or you cost us this, and that's I am very lenient generally, maybe more so than I need to be or should be, but that's the rare times where the flag comes out for me. But I don't know, Michael, how you deal with that?
Usually I'm having a good relationship with the coach in the game. It's when he starts to address my other crewmates, then I take kind of some umbrage to that. I was on a game several years ago, and I think my back judge made
several years ago.
Yeah.
Well,
give me
12?
Give me some credit. Might have been 3 or 4. The back judge, I think, made a DPI call, and one of the assistant coaches, you got to be effing kidding me? How do you effing make that call? That caused a flag to escape from my waistband. So that was a penalty. And I think he was still in the white when he did it. And then we had another play last year, year before, where I think Daniel had ruled on a fumble and one of the coaches didn't agree with it and started to talk to Daniel. I got in his face and said, you can talk to me and I'll answer any question you have. And he went on for 2 or 3 plays and finally said, sir, Coach, we're done with that play. We're going to continue playing football and we're going to move on from it. And then all of a sudden I was the enemy and he said, oh, I'm just trying to talk to you. And I said, we're done with it. So then he got offended. But he didn't talk to me for the rest of the night, so it was okay.
So it worked out.
It worked out just fine.
Yeah,
we moved on.
I think there's a limit on those, right? If we're having a discussion that lasts 3 or 4 plays about one play, there's just a point where I have to say, Coach, I've got to focus on this play. I've got to do my job. If I keep trying to think through that play, I'm going to miss something on the next one or the one that's coming up after that, and we're just going to compound the problems, right? But I'm fine if they want information. We should get them information, right? If they want numbers and I don't have it readily, I need to get them the numbers. If it's a little different, like what kind of category was it for a pass interference? It might take me slightly longer to get it, but I'll try to get that from whoever called it. But for me, it's just whenever the word "you" comes into it, that's where that's where the radar go up or the antenna go up, and it's where my fingers start to get a little itchy, moving towards the flag in my pocket, right? And I'm not trying to precipitate that, but if a coach has gotten to that point, that's right at that line, right? and they're in danger of crossing that line. And
we all have those lines.
Yeah, and that's just how it is. And like I said, I think I'm more lenient than I should be probably sometimes on my sidelines, but that's the big one for me. That's the big one for me is when it gets personal.
I don't think you are. And I think probably officials cause our own issues sometimes because we're not enough. And I know someone listening is probably not going to agree with that, but I tell my crew, these are guys who are trying to pay their mortgage and we're in the way.
Right.
So they're really not yelling at Michael Moran as Michael Moran. They're yelling at the guy that happens to be on the sidelines in the stripes. I mean, and people can't separate that sometimes, that they're, they kind of take it too personal a little bit. Generally, they get over it a couple plays and then move on. If they don't, like you said, on Michael's play, then it's time to do it. If they use foul language, then certainly. But I think sometimes we go looking for issues because we have to be the ones in charge and we're always right. And we're not always right, and we don't always have to be in charge.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to the discussion we had about injury timeouts, right? Don't go picking a fight. Don't go causing trouble. If somebody wants to blow up at us and they cross the line, then they cross the line. But there's not a need for us to sort of egg them on or create tension and hostility that's going to keep boiling up and then getting to that point.
You're exactly right.
I think Michael and I generally stay pretty cool on our sidelines. So I like to think we don't precipitate those. I'm not going to claim I've been innocent of that my entire career. But we pretty much stay calm.
I had a lot of flags when I was younger trying to assert my authority to coaches. And now I don't think my crew's had it unsportsmanlike now for about 9 years. And I haven't called a technical on basketball since I don't know, it's Michael's age. So I think as you get older, you learn that a little bit. And again, I've just kind of adopted that philosophy that he's not yelling at me. He's just yelling at the ref. And sometimes, the crowd likes to see him yelling. He's trying to save his job by showing the crowd that he's standing up for his kids or whatever. And, sometimes it's just a show also.
There's a lot that can be said for that. I've done some baseball too. And I understand sometimes a coach, he came out to me once and says, he goes, I'm going to clap my hands when we're done with this just to make it look like he came out here and I got mad at you. I said, oh, okay. That's literally what he said. He clapped his hands and said, all right, let's go. And that kind of fired up his bench and everybody was happy. So, and I've done the same. The reverse works too. If a coach is really upset about something and wants an interpretation or a question on something, I've run into officials before and said, hey, I'm just coming in here to make it look like I'm talking to you. And you both nod your hats and say, okay, and you shake your head a little bit. And I'm telling the trade secrets here, but then you run back and you say, Coach, he's got the same thing, and we move on. There's just a little bit of show, like you said, and it's a good faith by you to at least go in and ask if there really is a question. But if there's not, you move on.
Yep.
I think this kind of goes to another topic that I think is worth addressing. And I think you raised a good point here, Rick, that I think as all of us, when we were younger or earlier on in our career, we were probably a little more strict or a little more likely to
Assertive.
call that technical. Yeah, more assertive. And I think part of it too is that, we're constantly getting told, and we've discussed this many times on here, right? There's safety reasons for the white stripe on the sideline being officials only, right? That absolutely there is. But, I had a game recently where, I probably told my coaches, I don't know, several dozen times, please get back behind the white by the snap. And they did every time, right? So I didn't do a sideline warning because I never had a snap where they were out of it, but I did have to say it many times. And, we hear during the summers from, some other people that, that's your area, get that sideline warning down, get all that down. And, that's what the manuals say. That's what the rule book says. So I think it's harder when you're new that it's like, okay, well, I'm being told I've got to be very strict about this. And I don't know if it's wisdom, experience, or what that we get as we go older that we're like, okay, well, like you said, this is the coach's jobs. This is something we do on Friday night. We work throughout the week at it, but this is their jobs. So at this point in our careers, we're probably more lenient than we were, 5-10 years ago. Do you have any advice or I guess thoughts for new officials that I don't know how to calm down? Might be one way of putting it, or to say. Yeah.
My old boss always told me, take what we do very seriously, but don't take yourself very seriously. And I think that applies directly to officiating as well. I mean, what we do is serious. Absolutely. We arbitrate the game. And as Robert likes to say all the time, it would only be recess if we weren't there. I get that. But we're wrong sometimes. And we don't know what that coach has been going through all week. And we don't know, the AD might have told him he's got to win a certain number of games. And we just called a holding to take back a touchdown. And that pissed him off. I mean, he might even know it was the right call. That's just, to me, that's part of the game. Now, there will be people listening to this podcast and say, well, I'm going to flag him no matter what. And that's the subjectivity of officiating. My philosophy is to give them a little bit more leeway. And it seems to have paid off, at least for my crew and me anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to go. It's just that I think it just comes with experience too. I think when you're brand new and you're wet behind the ears, sort of.
But no, let me say also, Ryan. I mean, you guys have a boss in the Heartland. If he says he wants them flagged if they step out on the field, then that's what you do. We have a boss in the IHSAA, and Robert's big thing is if a coach is in the white during the play, you flag him. So that's what you do. I mean, we all work for people. Mm-hmm. Whether Rick Frank thinks that's the way it should be or not, do it. I mean, that's the way they want it. So that's the way you do it. And I'm sure you follow that same rule in Heartland.
Yeah, and I think we follow whatever guidance there is, right? I mean,
Right.
We were told, we discussed last week, in college this year, or we were told by one of our graders that a foul with 13 minutes left in the first quarter is a foul with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, even if it's a 60-point game at that point. Whereas in high school, with us having the running clock rule, there's probably things that we let go, or I can more accurately say there's things that I let go late in those games. A marginal hold that maybe they got a couple of yards advantage, whatever. But it's a 50-point game at that point in time, whatever. Whereas in college,
different philosophies.
A hold is a hold, regardless of the score, regardless of the time, and that it helps. It helps to know what the guidance is, and if we're told to call it, I'll call it.
Yep.
It's that simple. We had a question that Michael and I talked about in the last mailbag, Rick, that I think you might, with your experience and knowledge, might have some good views on as well.
This is like the question reprise version.
Yeah.
It's a new segment here. A new segment here on Learn Your Stripes. It's a question reprise.
It's a reprise.
Right. Bring this question back to life.
It's an after further review question.
I like it. Yes. The red flag is out.
The red flag is out because Michael and I are able to address this, but when we have somebody of Rick Frank's stature on,
for the love of God,
we figure that we're going to get the definitive answer here. So
you're going to be really disappointed.
The question from our friend Tom was this, and that was, what goes through your mind when choosing to call a foul or pass on and talk to the player? Where do you draw the line between preventive officiating versus coaching, so to speak?
So, man, that's the definition of experience, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's seeing plays and understanding the philosophy of the game and why a team is going up and down the field. And that's just sort of putting that all together and understanding, first of all, what the difference between an advantage foul is and a safety foul.
Right.
And my crew talks about that a lot. Safety fouls always called. There is no subjectivity,
Right.
period.
Right.
Sure.
And call it from anywhere. So that takes half your problem out of the way.
Right.
Then you deal with advantage fouls. Did it matter to the play? That's always it, no matter what. That's not even subjective. If it didn't matter to the play, we're not calling it.
Right.
And then did it matter to the play to a point where it needs to be called? My thing on holding always is if I can't count to 3 while they're holding, then it's not a hold. I think most people do that now, or it's a hold, it's a hold, it's a hold. If he's still holding, then I'm throwing it. If he let go after 2, I'm not throwing it. A block in the back, if I don't see the whole thing from the beginning to end, it's not a block in the back.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's different philosophies you can go by, but seeing plays and seeing snaps, I think, is the only way to get to that point where you sort of, and I don't know, it's kind of like in my business, it's the smell of marijuana. It's a very strange smell that you can't really describe what it smells like. And understanding how to call and what not to call is kind of the same way. You just know it when you see it, but it's hard to explain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think
analogy.
that's pretty much the summary that we came to. And I just want to note that Rick, like myself, is a lawyer, not
Yeah, I'm not a marijuana dealer.
not performing in some sort of illicit underground business.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I should point that out. I'm a prosecutor.
Field. Yeah.
I don't sell marijuana for a living. I'm a prosecutor. That's a good point, Ryan. We probably should clear that up.
I just wanted to make sure we're all above board here and that nobody's turning you into somebody afterwards, that you're not getting chased around the field Friday night by the people in power and whatnot. But yeah.
So the other thing I would tell Tom is watch video of those calls. After you decide to make that call, then go watch the video of it and see if it mattered to the play and see if it actually was a foul. So the next time you see that same scenario, you can either not call it if it wasn't or call it if it was.
Yeah, I mean, that's how that's the discussion that Michael and I had. Safety fouls and sportsmanlike fouls that might turn into safety fouls later. We have to get those. Then it's advantage fouls, and it's an experience thing. Work every snap you can, like you said. Watch the film. I still watch film and say, "Ooh, I missed that hold," or "Ooh, that was a bad one." But it's it's learning, and so I'm hoping that the next time I see it, I don't miss it the next time. And all of us are still working for the perfect game, and we'll never get there. But it's the goal, certainly, for all of us. JP asked us a question that we'll reprise as well, because again, we've got Rick Frank tonight, so we've got to get this. And
Challenge
JP
fight.
asked, "What?"
He says that, and we're going to talk about replay
yes.
later. It's very appropriate.
What things did you learn earlier in your career that stuck with you?
I think probably just what I already covered is just not to, one, to make me the game, and 2, not to take myself that serious. Because I remember when we're talking about that last question, when I was first started, I remember specifically throwing holds like on a defensive back all the way on the other side of the field. And I was so freaking proud of myself that I got that. And it was a great freaking hold. And it had absolutely nothing to do with the play. And now I look back on it and think, Jesus, you were horrible. So I think I learned what, matters to the game. And it's really not the referee. But I don't know if you guys, I don't think you have, but when I do basketball, people make fun of me because I never really change expression and I'm so boring, it's ridiculous. But I don't think people should come to watch the referees. I mean, I'm not very animated with my gestures and signals and all that nonsense. And I don't like killing the clock to send people out for the helmet because it draws attention to yourself. And I don't like going looking for issues. I mean, this is not anything that I made up, but you guys know this. If the coach forgets who the referees were, then that's the best thing we want, right?
Yeah.
Or if they don't even realize anybody was there. So,
right. Yeah, I think the games with the fewer flags are always better. It's
absolutely.
the ones we're not really able to keep penalty sheets necessarily in high school. Sometimes
fewer flags, fewer whistles, fewer conferences.
Yeah.
Fewer, discussions, just anything that takes the spotlight off officials. That's what I try to do, and that's I think what I learned early is it's not about the referees. It's about players, number one, who are only going to be able to do that for 3 or 4 years, and it's about coaches and fans. I mean, really, the officials really have not much to do with it, or shouldn't.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that.
But that's hard to learn, and I wasn't very good at that when I was younger. I mean,
it's hard,
I showed up wanting to be the show, man. I was the big badass referee, and people were going to watch my signals, and I was throwing flags. I mean, I carried 3 or 4 flags and had 3 or 4 whistles and psychedelic bean bags, and I was the shit, baby. But now I look back and think, man, you were stupid.
Rick had electronic whistles pre-COVID, so he could be blowing them, with each hand while also having one in the mouth.
I did buy one of those last year. I will have you know.
Oh, I bought a bunch of them, and boy, did they not work! Just
they
awful.
Sucked.
They are very cool though to use like a Star Trek phaser, though.
Yeah.
If you point it like a phaser in Star Trek, Star Trek is a show that was on a long time ago, Michael. But if you use that little whistle like a phaser, it works out pretty good. I like it.
Yeah.
Hopefully, never have to pull those out ever again.
What have you guys learned? And I know you guys are about 6, 7, 8 years in, probably both of you. So what's different from year one and right now? What have you learned?
I mean, we all say it, make it be there. Get the big ones. I think everybody is anxious when you get started out. I paid $10 for that flag. I got to use it now. That's always a running joke. But I think as I've progressed, I start to realize, okay, what has an effect on the play?
And I think that's a great statement. I tell my crew, don't go looking for fouls; they'll come to you.
Yeah.
Officials should not be looking for fouls. I know you guys do this already. You just see a hold in front of you. You don't look for it.
Right.
You just see it. And if you don't see it, then it's probably not a hold.
Yeah, I mean, same idea. I can think back to a play. It was a 99.5-yard touchdown play, pass.
You sure it wasn't 99 3/8?
It was 99.5 because they announced it multiple times over the loudspeaker afterward.
Nice.
That it was a school record because there had been a punt to the 1, and then there was a false start. So I know it's a 99.5-yard play.
Very sneaky.
So I threw a DPI because I saw the jersey pull. I mean, that jersey was stretched, but obviously, the score counted, and because it was DPI. And then somebody who was looking at the film said he didn't take his feet away, and I was in my 2nd or 3rd year, and I was like, "What are you talking about? Look at the jersey. It's stretched. It's going to tear. If it was stretched anymore, it would be a tear." It's like he didn't take his feet away. And then I got to thinking about it and talked to him some more, and that it's that whole advantage thing, right? Like a hold, if you could be outside the frame, but if the defender's not doing anything, there's not an advantage gain. Does he take the feet away? Is the defender or somebody trying to do something and they're being restricted in their movement? And so same idea with the holds, DPI, it's not just that they're being grabbed or something, the jersey's being pulled, that there has to be some advantage, otherwise you keep the flag in the pocket. So, same idea as the hold there. I think I talked about this on another episode. So after further review, throw the red challenge flag deal. I was at a practice this summer with some brand new officials where I was asked, how many flags do you throw a game? And it was just a question that took me off guard because I've never, ever thought about it like that. So, I said, well, no more than I have to, but I don't go looking for them. And I think that's like what you said, early on, it's like, well, do I have to throw 5 tonight? Do I need to throw 2, or am I not doing my job? If I have a game where I don't throw a flag, have I done my job? Yeah. Today, if I have a game where I don't throw a flag, I'd say, yeah, I did my job. So
I think my answer would be however many penalties there are in the game.
Yeah. However many I see that I need to throw. My other piece of advice, because I keep hearing from other younger officials as well, is that when you're working those games on those humid, sweaty Friday nights, when you come home, take out your equipment, including your bean bags and flags, and lay them out to dry. Because when you wake up on Saturday and you go to a game and you unzip that bag, it's rough. So that is an experience thing. When I get home on Friday night, everything gets set out to dry for the.
I still haven't learned that one yet. I let gear sit for 4 days once, and it was like a skunk dyed in an onion patch.
Oh, I know. We were in the locker room last week, and you guys started unzipping your bags. I'm like, how do you not learn this by now? So, So maybe as the old guy on the crew, I'll have to teach you guys.
These kids, Ryan.
Um, Speaking of kids, so again, we talked about newer officials. I'm just wondering, Rick, do you see, because you've been around a little bit longer than we have, or at least
Hey, that's a segue
officially.
right there, folks. That was a good one, Ryan. Way
Very
to go.
nice. Very nice.
Michael's teaching me some things as we go. But I know obviously we have a shortage of officials. It's not Indiana specific. It's a national issue in our sport and many others. One of the things is teaching them how to deal with the criticism from coaches, from parents, from players. Part of it too, I guess, is just getting in and learning. Is there something that you're seeing in our association or just in general? Is there some difference in just, I guess, who is becoming an official now? Are they younger than they were 15 years ago, older, starting out in careers? Is it anything like that, or is it just no real change there? It's just our numbers are down generally.
I don't know. You guys come to meetings. What do you see? I mean, I don't think there's that much of a change in age. And honestly, I'm not a big one that runs around and says we're short on numbers either, because we're not. We have 190 crews. There's only 160 games every week, so there's crews out there. I have a list of 30 subs that are waiting to fill on Friday nights if somebody needs a sub. So we have enough people. What we don't have are enough quality people who are dedicated to get better. Yeah. We have a lot of people who want to go make $100 on Friday night or do a couple of junior high games and make money, but we don't have a lot of people who are dedicated to get better. And that includes meetings and film and clinics and things like this and on and on.
I would agree with that. I think in the time I've been involved, I mean, the meetings to me, typically the audience looks the same. I mean, obviously our average age skews older, but that's just how it is.
We're spoiled in the IOA because we have, we're by far the largest. So we have plenty.
Very large, yeah.
Sure.
Probably 17 other associations, if you ask them the same question, they would be desperately saying we need people and we don't have enough people on Friday nights. So in a way, we're kind of spoiled and we live in a metro area. So
yeah, I think in other parts of the state, obviously, it's more of an issue than we have here. Along those lines, we talked about responding to coaches, responding to the criticism. Have you noticed the difference in the way officials are, one of the things we see from IHSA or NFHS is a lot of emphasis on sportsmanship, treatment of officials. Has there been a change from when you first started out and how officials are treated, or is it just more, some of my thought in the time I've been doing is just it's more known now because of Twitter and Facebook. And I know I sound old whenever you start talking about Twitter and Facebook on anything, but everything that happens tends to be more broadcast more, whereas in the past, a mistake on the field or something, some interaction doesn't necessarily get broadcast.
I think that's a great assessment. Yeah, I think that's a great assessment. All that stuff happened before. You just didn't read about it until the newspaper the next morning. A newspaper, Michael, is on a piece of paper. It came out every morning usually. And you had to wait till the next day to get the news. I know it was very weird.
Yeah, I never understood one of those.
So I think you're right. Social media has certainly changed that aspect. I will say the one thing that I think has changed is the hospitality for officials. Mm-hmm. I think that's much, much better now than it has been even within the last 5 or 10 years. And I think COVID kind of made people appreciate officials a little bit. I mean, I get a lot more thanks for being here and we appreciate what you do and that kind of stuff now that we used to. They might be lying, but at least they say it now.
Yeah, I think the hospitality has really improved. Schools really got out of their way to take care of us. So, I mean, we're treated awfully well. So I'm always appreciative of that. And so yeah, COVID, I think, has sort of been a double-edged sword in that people had a year or so where they couldn't come out and yell at us. So I think there's certain circumstances where they're making up for some lost time. But in general, I think everybody's happy to be back, and it's been awfully nice, to be back and to have more people out there with us too.
Mm-hmm.
Does he pay you overtime for the second hour, Michael?
No, same rate.
So the hospitality is not improved on Learn Your Stripes.
Yeah, it is not.
Yeah, we drag each other along. It's fine. No, I'd say same thing. It's I think it's just more widely known. It's easier to get that information quicker, and we live in that kind of that 24-hour news cycle, and so you see things right away. Games over at 10 o'clock, and by 11:30 you hear about it, or heck, even 10:30 you hear about what's going on. So,
yeah, we talk about it all the time, and I'm sure your crew does too. And at the college level, you have to get it right. So, if you throw a flag that you're not sure about, and somebody tells you to pick it up, you got to swallow your pride and do it, because in an hour it's going to be on 36 different views on Facebook, Twitter, and Snapchat, and it doesn't matter who threw the flag or who picked it up. All they're going to know is whether you got it right or not.
Yeah.
So we just have to get it right nowadays.
And part of that, it's not just you throwing it. If you've got information to help somebody who's may not have had the same view as you, there's an obligation to go and take that person off of the call too, or at least give them the information, right? So like you said, if they have a flag for DPI, but you have an angle that says it was a clean play, get to them, tell them what you saw. If they want to go ahead with the call, then obviously that's their right. But if you give all the information that you have, perhaps it saves that issue from coming up too.
I think that's the difference probably when I started 20 something years ago. We missed a lot of calls back then, but nobody really knew about them, or, things went on down the world. The coach was mad, but the CD that he looked at the next day, he couldn't hardly see it anyway, and there was not social media to share it with. So, but now, we are just, you're under a standard, and it starts in the NFL with the replay there. We have to be right 100% of the time. And if we're not, there's 9 views to show us how we were wrong. I don't know if it's fair or not. It is what it is.
They've even got 2, sometimes 3 views at the high school level. And I know at the college level, a lot of the schools they're streaming their own games live. So you've got the live feed there that is up on the internet forever, and that's got 2, 3, sometimes 4 views and replays and all that. And
that doesn't count the Facebook lives going on in the crowd.
And the
12 illegal drones and
right.
So we just have to be right. So it's to change, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Rick, you mentioned replay, starting with the NFL, and I know that you're a replay official.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can get into the specific of your location or anything of the sort, but I know that you're an NFL replay official, and
he's in an underground bunker.
So my actual game title is video operator. I work in the replay booth. I'm not necessarily a replay official.
Okay.
And there is an official in our association, Kevin Brown. He is a replay official. And he travels with the crew and actually looks at the plays. All I do is I'm an assistant for games at Lucas Oil, where I'm in the booth with the replay assistant and the replay official, and I sort of set the plays up for them to look at. And I'm a double checker on the clock and double checker on downs, and kind of a double checker in a lot of ways. There's a lot of, they call them GDAs, which stands for game day officials. They are generally high school and college officials who do different jobs on game days in the NFL. This is my 6th year to do it. Pretty cool.
Is your preparation for doing that, is it different versus a game that you're working on the field? Or
yeah, for sure. I'm not on the field or making any actual decisions, so mine, it's honestly more technical than anything. What I tell you is the really cool part of it that's helped me in officiating is just sort of hanging around. One of my jobs, I get there at 9 a.m. and I meet the crew off the bus and show them where the locker room is, and just sort of facilitate them with security. Cool. And then take the replay official and the replay assistant up to the booth and get them sort of oriented. So I kind of see like their routine and how they do things and how they communicate. And that has been just sort of very helpful and eye-opening on how it works at a professional level. And most certainly it's been eye-opening as to how freaking good those people are at what they do.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. Just thinking through just the changes in speed of the game, the athleticism, and with 7 of them out there,
they get so many right. It's unbelievable, and there's so much rule study that goes on, and so much. It's not certainly just 3 hours on Sunday. There's you talk about game film stuff. They break it down to every level possible. They're graded on every little move they make. Certainly every flag, but every little move they make is graded. One of the things I do, I run what's called an all 29 camera. So it has all 22 players plus all 7 officials on every play. And the NFL uses that to track the movement of every official on every play on exactly where they're supposed to be and what they do. And they're graded down if they do something wrong. So, I mean, if you think there's pressure doing Warren Central and Ben Davis, it ain't nothing compared to what they have in the NFL. Now, they make a lot more money.
Sure.
And, they don't have to be on some barn with a cold shower. I get that. But that, to me, has improved the respect level of what they do and how they just approach their preparation. I think I've sort of passed along to my crew, and I know Kevin does the same thing.
Yeah, I think that helps. And obviously, Michael and I have picked up a lot from college officials since we first started getting in. So that trickles down to what we're doing for Friday nights and preparing for that too, certainly. Or at least,
and I think that goes back to what I was saying about the total number of officials available. I mean, we have a lot of people who just want to do it as sort of a hobby on Friday nights. And I guess that's okay if that's what you want to do, but we don't have enough that want to study rules on Saturday and Sunday and then look at more rules on Monday and look at film on Tuesday and have a quiz on Wednesday and actually try to get better before that next Friday. It's more or less just a sort of a hobby to go referee a little football and have a few beers and eat out, and then we'll see you next Friday.
Yeah. And
that's okay, but that's not helping our craft, I guess.
Right. No, certainly.
But I've been I get to be a part of the replays too, then when it goes to replay, and I sort of get to watch all that and see how that process goes. And
that's pretty cool.
That part is all kind of secret, but it's a very cool thing what they do. And it's very, very organized, even though it sometimes doesn't seem like it on TV, but it's a pretty cool process.
Well, good. Thank you, everyone, for joining us once again for a very special episode of Learn Your Stripes. We want to thank Rick for his time and for all the insight, the humor, and our first foray into a few different words. But we certainly appreciate his time. We appreciate you for joining in. And as always, we'll leave you with a play to consider.
Let's hear it. Go, Michael.
2nd and 3 for A from the A 32-yard line. The game clock is running. B52 attempts to leave the field, and at the snap, his left foot is hovering over the sideline. His right foot is still in the field of play. Ooh. So we'll have everyone mull this over, and we'll be back with the answer next week. Is it legal? Is there a foul? If so, what is it? What will the down and distance be at the snap? What will the play clock be? Does the game clock start on the snap or the ready? And what are the differences between high school and college? So very loaded question here. Take that one back. Think it over.
Not many questions with the word hovering in it either. I like that.
We'll discuss that play at the start of the next episode.
Fabulous.
You can sometimes tell the questions I write.
Before you shut me off here, man, I want to tell you guys thanks again for putting this together. Not only tonight, but the entire season. So hopefully we can make it even better for next year. And
thanks for sticking around, Rick. Absolutely. We tend to run long on this show, so we thank you for sticking with us.
I think part of that was my pontificating this week, so I'll take some responsibility for that.
No, we enjoyed it. So let me finish the rest of the boilerplate. We'll discuss that play at the start of the next episode. In the meantime, if you want to let us know what your ruling would be, or if you have any questions or feel we made a mistake, please email us at learnyourstripes@gmail.com. You can find episodes or obtain an RSS link to download all episodes into your podcast app of choice at learnyourstripespodcast.com. Please also follow us on Facebook at Learn Your Stripes Podcast and on Twitter at LYS_podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, please rate us 5 stars and leave a review on your app of choice. You can also find us on the app Discord, where we'll have ongoing discussions of rules, mechanics, and play scenarios. We'll see you back here next week. In the meantime, keep learning your stripes.
Thank you, everyone.